So we continue where we left off in the episode Rock Bottom, where Megatron is at Grimlock's mercy and he's ready to kill him. Like, it's just, it's about to be over. He's about to cave his skull in and everything. However, at this time, RC and Jack managed to come in, with Jack using the drill like in the original to pretty much get out. Keep in mind, Bulkhead is not in this episode if you watch the last part. Now, RC is actually a little bit surprised and says, "Oh, you guys got Megatron here. Well, I guess we could just, finish him right then here." However, Jack, being kind of like the moral compass, says that, well, should we? Would Optimus do it? And this is where some of them kind of like roll their eyes. It's just like, you know what? No, he wouldn't do it. And this is where Lifeline says, all right, fine. But if he does something at base that gets some of us killed, that's on you. And so Megatron is then asked to just stand up and, well, they're going to take him back to base as a prisoner. However, Megatron, as he starts to walk forward, tries to do something slick. And he opens up, or tries to open up, with his fusion cannon, right? However, he aims at Grimlock, who dodges while transforming into his Tyrannosaur form. And, well, short way to say it, Megatron messed up. He grabs Megatron by the fusion cannon, crushing it in his jaws, causing like a miniature explosion in his mouth, and then slams Megatron right back on his face. However, he holds him down and burns his back, so that not only is Megatron injured, but he can't transform and fly off, meaning that Megatron is simply stuck with them right then and there. And Grimlock simply states, "Try it again. Try it again and see what happens. I will bite your head off this time." And so Grimlock turns right back into his form and then summons his mace again, or his, Warhammer. I'm just definitely going to call it that because it just sounds crazy, cooler. A whole Warhammer, right? And Megatron says, "You will pay for this." However, this is where Grimlock kind of like jaw checks him and tells him to keep walking. And so when they get back to the Autobot base, RC and Jack are the ones to walk through the portal first, and they're greeted by Bumblebee, and the rest of the Autobots are kind of like working. We kind of see Blaster doing some technician stuff, Ratchet doing, I guess you could say, his own, medical emergencies and stuff like that, or medical stuff, while Nightbeat's doing some, I guess you could say, planet-wide investigations. And so Bumblebee asks RC, "How's the mission?" And RC says, "You're not going to believe this." And, well, Megatron comes flying through the portal, and before he gets up, Grimlock stomps on his head, or stomps on his back, and presses the edge of his Warhammer to Megatron's head. And he states he's got one of the best claims to victory for the Autobot cause. And Blaster walks over to his buddy and says, "Dude, you have no idea how big of a moment this is, dude. We finally have a decent edge over the Decepticons." So this is where we go back to the Decepticon warship, and Starscream has pretty much just arrived. Keep in mind, he would have definitely witnessed Megatron being captured, and he pretty much states to the rest of the Decepticons that, well, right now Megatron is, captured and everything. And Soundwave simply looks at him like, "Really? Megatron was captured by the Autobots?" I find that almost hard to believe. And this is where Arachnid simply states, well, it would have to make sense because Starscream's not really capable of killing him. And Starscream just kind of looks at her, gives a nod, and then this is where Knockout kind of exclaims that, "So what do? We don't have a distinct edge against the Autobots at the moment, so what's the best thing we can do?" And this is where Arachnid simply states, well, right now they do have other options, and they could still make things work with just them for now. Meanwhile, back at the Autobot base, we do have everything kind of getting situated with Megatron now being captured, and unfortunately, the best they can do is pretty much cuffs and just kind of like chaining him to an area, or at least into a chamber area of the base, so that he's at least held prisoner. Meanwhile, Optimus and Ratchet are wondering if Megatron is plotting something, or he allowed himself to get captured. And keep in mind, Megatron is injured still, like from the burns and his whole fusion cannon being chumped on and destroyed. So, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. But as Optimus and Ratchet converge with the other Autobots, who are pretty much just kind of interested in Grimlock's whole story, Nightbeat asks a question. Who's going to guard him? And this is where Blaster states, well, I mean, we could all take turns. I mean, I don't really see a problem with guarding Megatron himself, right? And this is where Bulkhead states, even if he doesn't have his fusion cannon and possibly his blade as well, that's still Megatron at the end of the day. One of the fiercest warriors that the pits have ever produced. And so, as they're pretty much conversating amongst themselves, RC just kind of walks over to Grimlock and simply asks the very simple question, you think you could guard him for a while? To which Grimlock says, oh, well, since you asked so nicely, I could easily be able to do it. Now, this is where, excuse me, we get the episode partners. And considering the Decepticons do not have Megatron, this does mean that Starscream and Arachnid do have this budding rivalry. And this does result in, well, Starscream being captured by the Autobots because he's still in Arachnid's webbing. And, well, he does take them to the Harbinger. However, that entire situation does play out the same, in all honesty, because I don't really see a reason why it wouldn't. And so, when Arachnid does flee with the, flee without the immobilizer, she basically reports back to the ship that Starscream betrayed her. And so this kind of makes her acting second in command for the moment. However, this episode would definitely end off a bit differently, as I would definitely have RC, after she gets healed from her, I guess you could say, stomach gash from Starscream, she's actually walking around the base, kind of moping until she bumps into or runs into Grimlock, who's simply guarding Megatron's post. And she asks him, can he talk for a moment? And Grimlock's like, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, not doing anything. And this is where, we kind of get the episode of, I guess you could say TMI, but it's kind of like Nightbeat studying the data or the data cylinder for the moment before they actually go out and get it. Meanwhile, back with the conversation with Grimlock and RC asks Grimlock if he's ever lost people he's cared about. And Grimlock simply states, oh yes, plenty. He lost his entire team, his entire family. He talks about the time that he was pretty much under lockdown's care, if you will. How he tortured them to see their endurance levels. How he basically wanted to vivisect them, but said they would be more useful as combat beasts. And RC goes into how she lost Tailgate, how she lost Cliff Jumper, and how both of them kind of agree that they're both sick of it. Sick of all this loss, and how they pretty much just, I guess you could say, always have to heal from it. But yet, they feel like the people that do them wrong don't really get to pay. And this actually forms a little bit of a bond between the two, to where RC even touches Grimlock's chest and tells him, thank you. And Grimlock actually gently touches her hand and, states, anytime. He's always here for a conversation if you need it. And so it would actually pan over to Megatron's cell after this conversation, and he would be giving like the most outrageous and devious smile, because now he feels like he has something he can use. Something of a weakness, if you will. However, I wouldn't end it off in this part here. Before even the episode TMI even starts, we would go to Cybertron, and we would actually go to Shockwave's laboratory. This is where we see Slug, Scorn, and Strafe all being experimented on. However, they're actually very resilient, like 10 times more durable than the Dinobots of the regular continuity. And Shockwave is like, fascinating. These creatures are far more resilient than anything I've ever seen. And this is where he states, do we have a deal? And this is where it kind of comes in for Lockdown walking in, stating that, do we have a deal and stuff like that. And, well, Shockwave says yes, but he can't promise the procedure to be painless. If he wants a new body, then he's going to have to, well, endure it. And this is where I could definitely see Lockdown and his mercenaries kind of like tooling around in Shockwave's laboratory. And Shockwave simply states, step into the chamber. So Lockdown steps into this chamber where Shockwave actually activates it, right? And this begins to melt down Lockdown to his protoform. and it's very painful. However, Shockwave simply states that the process will be over very soon. And so he begins to code a lockdown in Ore 13, or Unutrium. Basically the metal that uses six shot and overlord. Sorry, I know I said Ore 13, excuse me. Unutrium, I meant to say Unutrium. So lockdown is like an agonizing pain as Shockwave is pretty much applying the Unutrium to his body. And this is where we kind of do see like the files of other characters that have it, like Six Shot, Overlord, and I believe Blackwing. Let me know in the comment section if I'm wrong. And Lockdown is just, you know, after a while the screaming stops. And Lockdown does exit the chamber. And Shockwave simply asks him, how do you feel? And so Lock kind of plans over. So, excuse me. It pans over to Lockdown in a much more sleek yet built design, new form and everything. And he says, I feel like going hunting. And that's where we're going to leave it off here, you guys. What's going to happen with Lockdown in the next part? Will he come to Decepticon's aid? Does he have any Decepticons with him at this moment? But hey, that's me all today, you guys. And y'all have a blessed day. Peace.